This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Parshas Vayeishev is this week's Parsha, also the Shabbos before Chanukah. So we have a difficult task ahead of us. What does Parshas Vayeishev have to do with Chanukah? So at the beginning of the Parsha, the Torah begins to tell us about the conflict between Yosef and his brothers. And the pasuk says that Yosef brought diba samra el avihem. Vayaveh Yosef es diba samra el avihem. Yosef brought a bad report to their father. So exactly what did Yosef tell Yaakov Avinu about the other brothers? What was this report? What exactly did he tell him? Did he say, my brothers are not coming on time to the Shiur, they're not coming on time to Shachas? Well, what exactly were they not doing that was correct? So the Medrash tells us, in Beis, Rabbi, Hayaraya, Vayava Yosef, Estiba, Samra, Ma Omar. Says the Medrash, what exactly did Yosef tell their father, his father? So we have three opinions, Rav Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and Reb Shimon. Rav Meir Omer, Chashudin hein banecha al ever menachai. Yosef told Yaakov Avinu that the Shvatim were suspect on ever menachai. They were eating the flesh, the limb of a living animal, which is a very severe avera. This is not just something that a Jews know how to do. This is something that even a non-Jew, even a guy, it's one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. Right? It's one of the Noachide laws. And yet, the Medrash is telling us that Yosef came to Yaakov and he says, your children, not only are they not good Jews, they're not even being good Goyim. That's the first opinion. Reb Shimon Omer, Toilen hein einayim b'vnei sa'aretz. They're acting inappropriately with Nashim. They're not acting properly. According to the Medrash, there were acts of illicit relations that the brothers were having, at least according to Yosef's report. Very difficult to understand. This is what Yosef tells his father about the Shvatim, about the Shiftei Ka, right? We know the brothers, their names were inscribed on the Choshen, on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, on the shoulder straps of the Kohen Gadol. Why? Because they were 12 perfect individuals. We know about Yaakov Avinu v'haisa mitasa shalema. His family was whole. It was complete. Not like Abraham. Abraham had Yishmael. Not like Yitzchak. Yitzchak had Esav. Yaakov, his whole family, they were all tzaddikim. And yet, look what Yosef is telling Yaakov Avinu. So far we have Reb Meir's opinion. We have Reb Shimon's opinion. Reb Yehuda Omer, mezalzel in hein b'vnei hashvachos v'korin lahem avadim. According to Reb Yehuda, you know what Yosef told Yaakov? That the brothers are putting down the sons of the maidservants, right? We know Yaakov Avinu had 4 wives, Rachel and Leah, Bilhah and Zilpah, and Bilhah and Zilpah maybe were not full wives, they were shefachos, and their children were who? Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher, and Yosef was saying that the brothers, when they would be hanging out, when Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisrael, when they would all be hanging out together, it almost sounds like they would come to Yaakov, that Yosef tells Yaakov that the real brothers were telling, the fake brothers, you guys are avadim, you guys are slaves, your mama, right? You know how it goes, right? They were making fun of their mother, making fun of their lineage. Rabbi Yehuda bar Simon Amar, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Vitlaseyan Laka, all three, Yosef criticized his brothers for violating all of these 3 sins. Number 1, eating Ever Menachat. Number 2, Toilen Einayim B'vnei Sa'aretz. They were acting inappropriately. And number 3, they were disparaging their brothers. And the question that we have to ask ourselves, and this question is raised by the Shlach HaKadosh, is that this whole episode of the Medrash, this whole inyan that the Medrash is telling us, doesn't seem to make so much sense. Do you really think the Shvatim did this? The Shvatim ate Ever Menachai? A guy that eats Ever Menachai, he's Chayiv Misa. If you would catch, a non-Jew walking down the street and he sees a chicken, and he would bite off the head of a chicken, that's, Im Yadenu Tkifa, if we had control, that would be the end of him. Ever Menachai is one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. You think the Shvatim violated, they were Toila and Am of nice hearts, they acted inappropriately with the Banais. You think the Shvatim would make fun of their brothers? It doesn't sound reasonable. So what are you going to say? Yosef made it up? Yosef made up a Baba Maisa? He really didn't like his brother, so he told his father this story? I mean, how could Yosef do something like that? I mean, either way you look at it, it doesn't make so much sense. Did the brothers do this? It doesn't make sense. The Shvatim would violate these Averos. On the other hand, what, Yosef made up a story? How could a tzaddik like Yosef make up this kind of fabricated story? So what are you going to say? Says the Shla, you have to say it was true. You have to say that whatever Yosef said was absolutely true. Why? Why do you have to say that? Because the Shla says we find two cases in Chumash of Lashon Hara. We have the Miraglim and we have Yosef. By the Miraglim it says, Maitziye Diba. They brought out a report. By Yosef it says, Vayave Dibasam. They brought it. What's the difference between Vayave and Maitziye? The difference is Maitziye means you take out. Meaning you make up a story out of the blue, out of the air. It has no basis in reality. It's not based even on a true story. Vayave means you take the facts and you bring them from A to B. So says the Shla, you have to say this was true. You have to say the brothers were eating Ever Menachai. They were suspect with Noisa Aretz, and they were putting down their brothers. That's what the words mean. Vayave Yosef es Dibasam Ra means he was relaying accurate information. So the question is, but how could this be true? How could we say about the Shiftei Ka, how could we say about Tzadikim, whose names appear on the Choshen, Lefnei Hashem, that they committed this type of Avera? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Chanukah. The Gemara tells us in the Masechta Shabbos, my Chanukah. What is Chanukah? And the Gemara goes on to say that the Yevanim, they came into the Heichal and they made everything sullied, they sullied everything, they made everything tameh, they made everything impure, they defiled all of the oil until the Chashmonaim prevailed. And what happened? They come into the Beis HaMikdash, they want to do the big cleanup job, right? And they're looking for the oil. They're looking everywhere. All the oil, it's contaminated, it's all impurified, it's all sullied, until they find one flask of oil that was signed with the signet of the Kohen Gadol. Says the Gemara, how much oil was in this flask? 1 day's worth, 1 night's worth. They lit it, lo and behold, a miracle happened, and it lasted for 8 days, right? We all know that. Everybody knows that, right? Probably the most well-known question of Maran Bet Yosef, right? The most famous question the Beis Yosef asks is the question he asks on Chanukah. And we can even make the case that this is probably the most well-known question in all of Jewish literature. And the question, I'm sure most of you are familiar with, is that, think about it. They had enough oil to last for 1 day. It lasted for 8 days. So how many days were miraculous? 7 days. So why do we celebrate Chanukah for 8 days? We should only celebrate 7 days of Chanukah, right? You ever hear this question? If you ever went to any Chanukah party and, somebody got up to speak, yeah, that was the question that's what they spoke about. Even if you fell asleep, that's what they asked, right? The Beis Yosef's kasha, that the miracle was only for 7 days, so why is Chanukah what? Why is Chanukah 8 days? Okay. Not only this is such a popular question, they have a sefer at home, it's called Ner Lameah, gives 100 answers to this question, right? Sal told me he has a sefer at home with 500 answers to this question, right? That means in the last year they came up with another 400 answers to the question. So, right, you have 100. I like that. His grandson, the author's name was Rachmiel Zelter. His grandson was in my class in elementary school. So I always, I grew up knowing that this kid's grandfather has 100 answers to the Beis Yosef's kasha. So let's read the Beis Yosef's question inside. At least, once in your lifetime you have to see what the Beis Yosef asks inside. Beis Yosef asks, look at number 4. Lama kavu shmani yamim. Why did Chazal enact 8 days of Chanukah? The kivan the shemen shebapach. Since there was enough oil to last for 1 night, the miracle was only 7 nights. That is the famous question of the Beis Yosef. The only thing is, why does the Beis Yosef get all the credit for this question? So, we would think that the Beis Yosef, you have on your sheet, he lived from 1488 to 1575. He must have been the first one to ask the question. So the Ner Lameya points out that he wants everyone to know the Beis Yosef was not the one who invented this question. Because the Meiri, who lived from 1249 to 1316, the Meiri asked this question before the Beis Yosef. The Meiri asked, V'layla harishain, shel haya sham nes hashemen, so why are you making a Yom Tif out of the first day of Chanukah? There was no miracle on the first day of Chanukah. So this question of the Beis Yosef was already asked by the Meiri, as pointed out by the Sefer Ner Lameya. He just wants to make it clear to everyone, this is not really the question of the Beis Yosef. Now certainly the Sefer Ner Lameya is the expert on the question of the Beis Yosef, but the Meiri was not the first person to ask this question. Because I found someone who asked the question even before the Meiri asked the question. Even 100 years before the Meiri, there was somebody by the name of Rabbi Avram Bar Yitzchak, one of the Rishonim. He wrote the Sefer HaEshkal, and the Sefer HaEshkal asked the same question. And again, the question is, if there was enough oil to last for one day, why do we celebrate 8 days of Chanukah? There were only 7 miraculous days. Rabbi said the Beis Yosef gives 3 answers to the question. You ready? Answer number 1. What they did was, they poured in the first night 1/8 of the oil they had, and all of a sudden, it regenerated. It lasted for the entire night. So even the first day was a miracle. So what they did was, the first night they poured in 1/8, and it filled up. The second night they poured in 1/8, it filled up. The third night they poured in 1/8, it filled up. So how many days of miracles were there? 8 days of miracles. That's the first answer of the Beis Yosef. The second answer of the Beis Yosef.
The 8th day wasn't the most. So what did they choose in 8th?
What?
Like, why did they choose an 8th?
Oh, because they knew it would take 8 days to find new oil. Either it was a 4-day travel, or they had to be matar themselves. So, yeah. So or you could say, says the Beis Yosef, they poured in the whole cup the first night, and then as soon as they poured it into the menorah, the cup regenerated. Or you could say, says the Beis Yosef, they poured in the whole cup the first night, and as soon as it burnt down, already the first night it regenerated. These are the 3 answers of the Beis Yosef. Okay? My favorite answer to the Beis Yosef's kasha, ready for this? My favorite answer comes from the Shiltus. Okay? Who is the Shiltus? The Shiltus was written by one of the Gaonim, one of the great sages from the Gaonic period, even before the Rishonim, Rabbi Achai Gaon. Now, Rabbi Achai Gaon is very interesting. The Shiltus was a very modern sefer when it was written. You know, it may have been even controversial. Why? Because until the Shiltus, if you wanted to write a sefer on Halacha, so you wrote a Shulchan Aruch, you wrote a Torah, but to write on the Parsha, to write halachas on the Parsha, what is it, like art scroll? You're going to write halachas on the Parsha? That's like, for, I don't know, for kids, for children, people, but you write on the Parsha. If you look in the Meiri's Hakdama to Perkei Avos, the Meiri traces back the tradition, the Messiah, from Moshe Rabbeinu all the way until the Rebbe of the Meiri himself. And the Meiri lists on that chain Rabbi Achai Gaon. And the Meiri says, why is Rabbi Achai Gaon writing halachas on the Parsha? Listen to this. The Meiri writes, Rabbi Achai Gaon yesh lo ben shalo haya lo made klal. Rabbi Achai Gaon had a son who did not crack open a sefer. That's what Meiri writes. He didn't learn. He wasn't interested in Gemara. So Rabbi Achai Gaon said, what am I going to do? I'm going to, he's going to be a dropout. So I'll have to write the Shiltus so my son could learn something. So Rabbi Achai Gaon wrote halachos on the Parsha. And that already set a precedent. From then on, it became very popular to write halachos on the Parsha, the Sefer HaChinuch, and many other storms. So if you look in the Shiltus has a different version of the story. You ready for this? The Shiltus says like this. The Shiltus says, look at number 8. The Tanya, b'chafei b'kislev yomei delayla misbad. The 25th day of Kislev, you have 8 days, you don't eulogize. Shekshanichnesu yivanim laheichal. Timu kol shmanim shebeheichal v'loyhoy lahem shemen. Lahadlik b'beis hamikdash, didn't have enough oil. Uchshegabru malchei beis chashmonoi v'natzcham. Badku v'loymatzu shemen. They searched, they couldn't find oil. Ela pachechad shayamunach v'chesam shal kain gadol. Listen to this. Ve'loi haya boy lahadlik afilu yom echad. They didn't have enough oil even to last for one day. Not like the Gemara. The Gemara said they had enough oil to last for 1 day. Look at the Shultas. Shultas says they didn't have enough oil even to last for 1 day. So if that's the story, the question doesn't begin, right? The question is, why do we have Chanukah 8 days? But they had enough oil for the first day. That first day wasn't a miracle. No, they didn't. According to the Shultas, they didn't even have enough oil for the first day. So the question doesn't even begin. And that, I assume, is probably why nobody asked the question until the Sefer HaEshkol 1,100 years later. Because the Sefer HaEshkol, when he asked the question, he says, according to the Girsa of the Shultas, there's no question over here. But one of the original Girsais in the Gemara is they didn't even have enough oil to last for 1 day. So then the question doesn't even begin. You don't need a Sefer of 100 Terutzim. You certainly don't need a Sefer of 500 Terutzim. There's no question. Even the first day was a miracle. The problem is, the Shultas contradicts himself. Because if you look 5 pages earlier in the Shultas says, look at number 9, Bahava Beis Shiur Yom Echad. There was enough oil to last for 1 day. So now before we use the Shultas to answer the question, the Shultas has to make up his mind. Did they have enough oil for the 1 day or did they not have enough oil for 1 day? The Shultas says in number 9 earlier, they had enough oil to last for 1 day. So we're in big trouble here, right? The Shultas is in big trouble. On the one hand, he wants to answer the question, they didn't even have enough oil for the first day. But then earlier, he says explicitly they had enough oil for them. So Rabbi said, who do we turn to when we're in trouble? Let's see, who's been here long enough to know who we turn to when we're in trouble?
Rabbi.
Which one?
You?
Me, huh? The Chidah, come on. All right, you're going to have to come back. It's good, okay. The Chidah, right? So the Chidah says that according to the Girsa of the Shultas, there's no question over here. Because they didn't even have enough oil for 1 day. But the problem is, says the Chidah, the Shultas contradicts himself. Says the Chidah, they're both true. There was enough oil for 1 day, and there wasn't enough oil for 1 day. How could you have enough oil for 1 day and not? He says very simple. In this cup, there's enough oil for 1 day, but you're not lighting this cup. You're lighting the menorah. So when you pour from this cup into the menorah, some of the oil is going to stick to the inside of the cup. So once you pour it, you no longer have enough oil for 1 night. In other words, efshar l'tzamtzem, says the Chidah. If you have exactly enough oil for 1 night in this cup, then once you put it into the menorah, there is slightly less than enough oil for 1 night. So then it comes out even the first night was a miracle. Okay. Rabbi, that was just tangential. Okay, that was just tangential. We are not here this evening to talk about the question of the Beis Yosef. We'll leave that, to the Svarim that have hundreds of answers. Although we are going to give a new answer tonight that may not be in the Sefer. What we're going to talk about tonight is another famous question. And this question is what we call a question that has been widespread in the Olam HaYeshivos, in the yeshiva world. Okay? This is the kasha of Reb Chaim. When we talk about Reb Chaim, who are we talking about? Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, the Brisker Rav. Yeah? Right. The father of the Brisker Rav. Reb Chaim. You ready for the question? Listen to this question. What happened? They poured in the oil, right? They didn't have enough oil to last for 8 days. And somehow, miraculously, the oil regenerated, and it grew, and it increased. Says Reb Chaim Brisker, 1 second. Where did this oil come from? What kind of oil is this? Did you see any oil being squeezed out of an olive? No. It miraculously, poof, right? It appeared. Magical oil, miraculous oil, is not halachic oil. It's not halachically kosher for lighting the menorah. Yeah? If let's say, you didn't have tefillin, and you daven, and all of a sudden tefillin appeared. Can't make a bracha on it. It's not kosher tefillin. That's not tefillin is tefillin that was made by, you had a batemacher, and you had a sefer who wrote it. Magical tefillin isn't tefillin. Magical oil is not oil. It's very nice. It might be very holy, and you probably could sell it for a lot of money at an auction before you sell the aliyos, and then you sell the shem and zayis, and you put in the aron kodesh for a few days. You could milk it for even more money, right? And you could have the rabbanim will bless it, and they'll daven 40 days at the kaisa, and you get a lot of money for it. But it's not kosher for the menorah, because for the menorah you need shemen, zayis, zach. You need pure olive oil. This is not olive oil. This is shemen nes. This is miracle oil. Miracle oil, you know. Right? It sounds like some product, you know. You know, you could rub it on your skin. Miracle oil.
Miracle whip.
What?
Miracle whip.
Miracle whip, yeah.
Snake oil.
You know, you can make people disappear with it. Miracle oil. So asked Reb Chaim Brisker, very nice. Hashem made this beautiful miracle, and we celebrate Chanukah, and we eat latkes, and jelly donuts, and chocolate coins, right? Everything. And now you even have to sing the Maccabees, right? You have to sing Maccabees. But, halachically speaking, it was not kosher for the menorah. It was possible. That's the famous question of Reb Chaim Brisker that's brought down in the Sefer Mayadim Halacha of Reb Zevin. And it's also quoted in the Sefer Mikroi Kodesh by Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank. And recently they put out a new Sefer called Asufos Rabbeinu Chaim Halevi Brisker of all the Chidushei Torah of Reb Chaim, and this question appears. And therefore Reb Chaim Brisker says, you know what you have to say? You know what they did? I'll tell you what they did, says Reb Chaim. The miracle was not that the oil increased quantitatively, but rather the miracle was in the quality of the oil. In other words, what happened was, they poured all the oil in on the first night, and guess what happened? It only went down 1/8. So the oil did not increase. It was regular, natural oil. It was 1 day's worth of oil. But in 1 day, only 1/8 of it burned. So the quality of this oil improved. It's not that oil regenerated, more oil formed. No, that would not be kosher oil. They poured in a whole day's worth of oil, only 1/8 of the oil burnt on the first night. And on the second night, the second eighth. And on the third night, the third eighth. And finally on the 8th night, it all burnt down. That's why we have 8 days of Chanukah. That's the answer to the Beis Yosef's question. But to say that miraculously oil appeared out of nowhere, no way. No way, Jose, says Reb Chaim. That can't be. Why? Because that's miracle oil. Miracle oil is not halachic oil. This is the big question of Reb Chaim, okay? So if you're walking down the street tomorrow and somebody says, you have a good kasha from the Olam HaYeshivas, not the Beis Yosef's question. I know that question already, right? Somebody wants to hear a good kasha they ask in yeshiva. You know, in the Alum de Shekasha, you tell them over Reb Chaim's kasha. When Reb Zevin heard this question, Reb Zevin said, I have a raya, I have a proof that Reb Chaim's kasha is a very good question. Why? He said, remember in Sefer Malachim Beis, there was a man by the name of Ovadia. We read about him in the Haftarah this past week. Yeah? And Ovadia, Yarei Es Hashem. Whenever you see Yarei Es Hashem, Es L'Rabbois Talmidei Chachamim. He didn't just fear God. He feared Torah scholars. Right? What does that mean? Because Achav wanted to kill out all the Talmidei Chachamim. So Ovadia took 100 Nevi'im, he hid them in a cave, and he protected them. And he fed them. Now, if you want to save Jews, it costs money. Where did Ovadia get the money from? He borrowed a lot of money. He borrowed and he borrowed and he borrowed, and then unfortunately he passed away. And his almana got left with the debt. And the almana doesn't know what to do because the creditors are coming. They want to take away everything she has. They're banging on the door. They're calling on the cell phone, on the regular phone. They're texting, emailing, everything. Yeah? She doesn't know what to do. So she goes to the Navi Elisha, and she says, Elisha, what should I do? So Elisha says, you have any oil in the house? So she said, I only have 1 cup. So Elisha says, get all the cans and baskets and barrels and containers you have, bring them here. She takes the cup of oil and she starts pouring into 1 cup, into another barrel. She's filling up hundreds of barrels. Elisha says, now you're a wealthy woman, go sell the oil, pay up the creditors. Happily ever after. That's the end of the story. The Radak quotes the Tosefta that says that the woman then came to Elisha and asked Elisha a halachic shayla. You ready for the question? She asked him, now that I have 100 barrels of oil, I have to give meiser, right? Halacha. If somebody earns money and they're able to meet their expenses, they're required to give 10% to charity, to tzedakah. So she wants to know. Hashem just, she won the lottery, Powerball Mega Million, right? She won 100 barrels of olive oil. She has to give 10 to tzedakah. So Elisha says, you're pater, you're exempt. Why?
Miracle.
This is not earning. This is not oil. This is shemenef. This is miraculous oil. You're exempt. You're exempt from meiser. You're pater. Says Reb Zevin, if the Radak is bringing down from the Tosefta that miraculous oil is exempt from meiser, so then miraculous oil, you cannot fulfill the mitzvah of lighting the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. It's the same thing. So this is a very solid proof, says Reb Zevin, to the kasha of Reb Chaim Brisker, miraculous oil is not oil. So what they use, so like Reb Chaim says, you have to say they poured in 1 day's worth of oil. The oil didn't increase. It only 1/8 of it was used up. The miracle was qualitative, not quantitative. In other words, 1/8 of a container of oil that should have only lasted 1/8 of a night, it lasted the entire night. It's not that the oil increased qualitatively, but the quality of the oil was enhanced. It was a miraculous quality oil. Yeah? Right? You go online, you could buy miraculous quantitative oil, miraculous qualitative oil, right? So that it says Reb Chaim, the miracle was in the quality. Okay. So far we have a very solid proof from Tanakh that miraculous oil is exempt from halacha. Let's see if we could bring some other proofs from different places about this inyan of whether something miraculous is subject to halacha or is not subject to halacha. And eventually we're going to come back to Yosef and his brothers. Okay. Who remembers the story? Yeah? Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, Gemara and Shabbos. Remember, he was running away from the Romans. He went into the cave. What did Reb Shimon Bar Yochai eat for all those years? Carob tree, right? Miraculously, a carob tree grew. Oh, wait a second. Did he eat from the carob tree?
Yes.
How could he eat from the tree? Isn't it arla? The first 3 years of a tree, you can't eat the fruit. The 4th year, you need to bring the fruits up to Yerushalayim. How could Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Reb Elazar eat from the fruit of the carob? You're not going to eat arla. The first 3 years, you can't eat it. Okay, you ready for this? We have a new name, new Maramakam. Says Reb Aaron Leib Steinman, one of the Gedolei Hadar of today, lives in Bnei Brak. Says Reb Aaron Leib Steinman, we have a raya from this Gemara that miraculous products are exempt from halacha. This wasn't a regular tree. This was a miracle carob tree. A miracle carob tree is pater from arla. There's no halacha of arla on a miracle carob tree. You still have to thank Hashem. Look, they made a bracha on the man. They still have to have gratitude. But there's no din of arla. There's no din of arla. But then Rabbi Leisham said, no, it's not a proof. You know why it's not a proof? He says like this. Maybe I'll tell you miracle products are not exempt from halacha. So why was Reb Shimon Bar Yochai allowed to eat the fruit? Wasn't it miraculous? He says, no. Because when it comes to arla, the Torah says, Vin unitatem kaletz ma'achal. If you plant a fruit tree, you need to take arla. You can't eat it. Now, this wasn't planted. This tree was not planted. Maybe really miraculous products are obligated in halacha. The only thing is, you have to plant it. If, let's say, you could create a tree without planting it, let's say in the laboratory, right? My father-in-law is here today. Maybe, could you plant something in the laboratory?
It grows by itself.
If it grows by itself. So maybe you'd be pater from arla, right? There's no obligation. So he's saying, it's not that a miraculous thing is exempt from halacha. What is it? What is it? It wasn't planted. It wasn't planted. So therefore, maybe that's the reason why Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was able to eat from the fruit of the carob tree. Okay. Let's bring another proof. You ready for this? In the Mishkan, right? 40 years in the Mishkan. They lit the menorah. Where'd they get the oil from? Where'd they get the oil from? They had olive trees growing in the desert. Anyone ever seen an olive tree growing in the desert? So Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says, you know where they got it from? Look at number 19. Pasuk Chavches. V'sayivin anone shemaya. The clouds, the anane hakavod went. The ozlin legan Eden. They went to the Garden of Eden. Yeah? Not on Coney Island. They went to real right? Gan Eden. V'nasvin mitaman, and they brought from there Yas Busba Bechira, choice Ketires, V'yas Mishcha Dezeis, and olive oil.
Could you put this in English?
Yeah. The clouds of glory went. They took olive oil from the Garden of Eden, from Gan Eden, from paradise.
How they could go there, pardon me?
The clouds?
They go to Gan Eden.
The clouds, how'd they go there?
I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
The clouds of glory, they got in. I don't know how exactly. They had keys, they had a pass. They had special VIP pass. Hashem let them in Gan Eden. They took the olive oil. They brought it to the people at the Mishkan. Says Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank, 1 second. This is normal oil. This is oil. This is not oil. This is the kind of oil you get in Wasserman's. This is miraculous oil. This is miraculous oil. And this is what they lit in the Mishkan for 40 years. So don't you see, not like Reb Chaim's question, miraculous oil is oil. Says Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank, it's not a question on Reb Chaim. Because it doesn't say the cloud magically created the oil. The cloud got it from Gan Eden. Now, if you would ever go to Gan Eden, you would see over there are olive trees growing in Gan Eden. Says Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank, how do I know? And I was never there. I'll tell you how I know. Because in Parshas Noach, it talks about the Yoina. And the Yoina had an olive branch in its mouth. And the Medrash, look at number 21. In Beis Rab, asks, where did the Yoina get it from? And the Medrash says, it got it from Gan Eden. So what do you see from there? That if you go to Gan Eden, they have olive trees. So it wasn't miraculous oil. It was regular oil that was attained in a miraculous manner. So there's no evidence from the shemen that was used in the Mishkan that shemen nes is permitted. Maybe really you can use shemen nes, like Reb Chaim is asking. But the fact that they got oil from the Gan Eden, it's not miraculous, it's regular oil. It was gotten in a miraculous manner. However, as you are about to see, it is very unclear whether Reb Chaim Brisker ever asked this question, okay? Very unclear. It's very controversial. Did Reb Chaim ask this question, right? Remember the question? The question is, how could we have used, in the times of Chanukah, miraculous oil? Miraculous oil is not oil. And in fact, Reb David Soloveitchik, who is a son of the Brisker Rav, who is the son of Reb Chaim, he claims he lived in the son of Reb Chaim. Again, Reb Chaim is the one who we're alleging the question to. His son was the Griz, the Brisker Rav. His son is Reb David Soloveitchik. Reb David Soloveitchik said, look, I grew up in the house of the Griz, and I ate at all the Chanukah parties. Never did my father say, Reb Chaim asked this question. I never heard my whole life that Reb Chaim asked this question. And says Reb David, there's no way he asked this question. He never asked this question. Because the same way they got miraculous oil in the times of the Mishkan from Gan Eden, you could use miraculous oil. So it's a little uncertain, as you're about to see, whether Reb Chaim in fact asked this question. On the other hand, I'm going to bring you a raya now, that miraculous oil is kosher for the menorah. You want to hear a very good raya? From the Beis Yosef. Because what does the Beis Yosef answer to the question? The Beis Yosef says, the first night of Chanukah, they poured the whole thing in, and it regenerated. And that's what they use the second night. So obviously the Beis Yosef holds that miraculous oil is good oil. So very nice. Reb Chaim feels that miraculous oil is not kosher. Reb Chaim is forced to say they poured the whole thing in, and every night it went down an eighth, an eighth, an eighth, an eighth. But according to the Beis Yosef, says very clearly that it regenerated miraculously, and it's still good for the menorah. I'll ask you another question. Okay? The Gemara tells us in Bava Metzia and in Masechta Tainis. Yeah? You're going into your bank. Yeah? And you have a big room with treasure chest, hundreds and thousands of dollars. You even have a diving board. You dive in and you swim in all your money, right? And every day you go in to count your money. So the Gemara says, what should you do first? Should you count it first, or should you daven first that Hashem should increase it? So the Gemara says, first daven that Hashem should increase the money, and then count it. Because once you count it, once you count $100 billion, so Hashem's not going to throw in another $100. But if you first daven, and then you count, who knows, maybe Hashem will slip in some extra money. Yeah? Okay. Says the Gemara, so first daven, Yeah, when you go to the bank, first daven, and then check your accounts. Yeah? Now, if you don't have anything, then you'll know it's an open miracle. But if you have a lot of money, maybe Hashem will slip in another $100. Says the Gemara, why are you going in to count your money? You're going in to give meiser, because you count your money, and you're going to count it. You have $100 million. How much do you have to give? $10 million to tzedakah. So wait a second. Ask the Sefer Kli Chemda. You ready for that? What's going on over here? You have, let's say like this. You had $100 million in your bank account. And you're going to daven, Hashem, give me more money. Hashem's going to slip in $100, and now you're going to go give meiser. Or even better, let's talk about fruit. You had 100 apples. You're going to say, Hashem, give me more produce. So now you're going to come in, there are 110 apples. So instead of giving 10 apples for meiser, now you have to give 11. So ask the Kli Chemda, 11 apples. Which 11 apples are you going to take? If you're going to take one of those apples that miraculously came, those apples, the Radak told us, are pater from meiser. Because miraculous apples are pater from meiser. So you're going to take one of those apples which is exempt from meiser to exempt some of the other apples that are chayiv in meiser? You can't take min Torah alachiv. You can't take from something that's exempt from meiser on something that's chayiv in meiser. So this Gemara seems to indicate, says the Kli Chemda, that miraculous produce is chayiv in meiser.
With the vinegar, no?
Yeah.
You shouldn't give from your produce. You shouldn't use the miracle. You shouldn't put that.
You can't. Yeah, that's something else. Something that's miraculous. Not supposed to get benefit from. Not supposed to be maneh from ma'aseh nisim.
What about being bottle?
But this Gemara, what?
Bottle, like bottle of shisha?
Yeah, baria filu be'elef like bottle, right? It's not. So if we're talking about apples, right? Money is also not bottle. Money is not batal. Yeah. Money is kasef like batal. So again, this Gemara seems to indicate that no, miraculous produce is chayiv in meiser. Because if it would be pater from meiser, then how could you pray and then go in and take off meiser? You may be taking from some of that miraculous produce. So the Kli Chemda says the following split. Okay, you ready for this? He says like this. It depends what the starting point is. In the case of the Isha Hashunamis, she had a little bit of oil. That oil, she had already taken meiser off of that oil. So if that oil regenerates, it will have the same status as the original oil. And the same way the original oil was already meisered, so whatever regenerates is also, it's already exempt. Because whatever miraculously grows from something has a status of the original thing. So in the case of the woman who her oil regenerated, then since the original oil was taken off, what has regenerated now is exempt from meiser. But in the case of a guy who's going into his silo to count the produce, to take off meiser, he has not taken meiser off anything yet. So everything's chayiv in meiser. So whatever regenerates is also chayiv in meiser. Okay? A little confusing, right? Okay. Let's go a little bit further. There was a Rav by the name of Rav Menachem ben Menachem, who is a Rosh Yeshiva in Yeshivas Tifrach in Eretz Yisrael, who claims that he once met a very old man with a long white beard. And this old man with a white beard actually met Reb Chaim Brisker. And when he was a young kid. And this old man says that when he was a young kid, he comes to Reb Chaim, he says, Reb Chaim, you know that famous question you ask, how could you use the oil, how could they use the oil in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, that miraculous oil, but it's Shem and Ace? I have a good answer to that question. So he answers the question, and Reb Chaim says, that's a beautiful answer. But I never asked the question. So here we have, original testimony, eyewitness testimony, that Reb Chaim said he never asked the question. And in fact, Reb David Soloveitchik says definitively, Reb Chaim never asked this question. Why not? Because Reb David Soloveitchik says he has a clear proof from Shas, miraculous products are halachically acceptable. What's the proof? You ready for this? a Gemara in Menachos Daf Samach Tes. The Gemara says like this. Remember Hurricane Sandy? Yeah? So there is something called a water spout. You know what a water spout is? Yeah, what's a water spout?
Under the ocean surface.
Yeah? A water spout it's like a tornado that it picks up water. It could pick up water from the ocean, deposit it somewhere else. It's an actual phenomenon that the Gemara discusses. The Gemara wants to know, if you have a water spout, it picks up wheat and it deposits it on the Mizbeach. Could you bring a carbon mincha from that wheat? Right? And we know a carbon mincha has to come from chitim. So the Gemara wants to know, if you have a water spout, a wind picks up wheat and puts it on the Mizbeach, is it kosher for a carbon mincha? So the Gemara says,
No.
why not?
It's a miracle.
Why not? Taisa said no, that's not what the Gemara means. It doesn't mean a water spout. It means, what if you have a cloud that miraculously deposits wheat on the Mizbeach? Can you bring a carbon mincha from that wheat? Says the Gemara, why not? Says the Dov Salvation, what do you mean, why not? Because miraculous wheat is not wheat.
The wheat is still, the wheat is still wheat, but it's brought out.
Does it come from flour though?
But you see from this Gemara, very clearly, that if miraculously wheat appears, it is halachic wheat, and you could bring a carbon mincha from it. So if miraculous wheat is wheat, then miraculous oil is oil. And therefore, Rav David Soloveitchik says, Rav Chaim never asked this question. Miraculous wheat is wheat, miraculous oil is oil. And that's his conclusion, that Rav Chaim never asked the question. We still have a problem though. What are we going to do with the Radak that says that miraculous oil is exempt from Meiser? So you could say like we answered before, because since she had already taken off Meiser off the original oil, so whatever regenerates has the same status as that original oil, even though that's not what the Radak says. The Radak says it's because it's miraculous. So Rabbi said, I would like to say that Reb Chaim definitely asked this question. No question. He definitely asked this question. And I'm going to bring you 3 proofs that Reb Chaim asked this question. The only thing we're going to have to deal with is the fact that Reb Chaim, we have an eyewitness testimony that they asked Reb Chaim, did you ask it? And he said, no. We'll deal with that. But first we're going to bring 3 proofs that Reb Chaim asked the question, and one of the proofs we're going to bring from Yosef and his brothers. Okay? Proof number 1, you know the Briskers say, there are 3 achronim that have the status of a Rishon. Reb Chaim, Reb Chaim, and the Vilna Gaon, and the Malbim. So let's see what the Malbim has to say about miraculous products. Look at number 32. It says in Vayera, the Malachim come to Avraham Avinu, and Avraham Avinu is running after a cow. And Vayemaher la'asoi. He hurried to make it. To say Vayemar levasha lo'isai, lishchai lo'isai, to cook it, to slaughter it. Vayemar la'asoi, says the Malbim. No, he had to make it. The cow ran away, so he was left with no cow, so he had to make a new cow. So what did he do? He opened up the new book that he just authored, called Sefer HaYetzirah, which is written by Avraham Avinu. And he said some kind of mystical incantation. He created a cow. Says the Malbim, what are we getting involved in these, mystical things? Why are we saying Avraham made a cow? Says the Malbim, we have to say he made a cow. You know why? Because the Chumash says he served the Malachim meat, and he served them milk. How could he serve the angels basar v'chalav? Avraham made the angels do an aver being basar v'chalav? So you have to say the meat he served wasn't meat. Why? Because it was miraculous. It was miraculous meat. He created the cow, b'sefer hayitzir. That's what it means. Vayikach chema v'chalav uben abakar asher asa. Says the Malbim, Ratza loymar, Yan sha'asai al yedei sefer yitzira, because Avram created it with this mystical book. Hayu l'chaylim lechlam chalav. You could eat it with milk, because miraculous meat is not meat. That's a pretty good proof, I think, that a davar nisi, a miraculous item, is not halachically recognized. I'm going to bring you another proof. Back to the Shlach Kadosh. Yosef HaTzadik is speaking Lashon Hara about the brothers. Yeah? What did he say? They're eating Eiver Min Achai. They're acting inappropriately with Nashem. Says the Shla Mimanavshach. Either way you look at it, it doesn't make sense. If, Yosef's making up a fabricated story, he's making up a story, that can't be. It's the truth. The Shvatim are eating Eiver Min Achai. Says the Shlach Kadosh. Listen to this. Who wrote the Sefer HaYetzirah? Abraham. Who did he teach it to? Yitzchak. Who did Yitzchak teach it to? Yaakov. Who did Yaakov teach it to?
Yosef.
Not all of his sons.
Yosef.
He did not teach it to 4 of his sons. Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Why not? Because the Gemara in Kedushin says you can't teach secrets of the Torah to someone whose mother is a shivcha. Unless you're a meyuchas, you can't learn the secrets of the Torah. So when Reuven and Shimon and Levi and Yehuda were busy with the Sefer HaYetzirah, so Dan and Naphtali came and said, "What are you busy with?" He said, "Sorry, you're an Evet. You can't learn this." They weren't putting them down. They were just telling them the halacha. You can't learn the Sefer HaYetzirah because your mother is a shivcha. Now we know from the Gemara in Sanhedrin that often Erev Shabbos, the Amoraim, they wouldn't go shopping. What, they're going to wait in errands for, who knows how long? They made a cow with the Sefer HaYetzirah. So that's what the brothers did. They made a cow with the Sefer HaYetzirah. Says the Shlah, do you have to shech the cow that was created with the Sefer HaYetzirah? No. Because a miraculous cow is not a cow. You could bite right into it. Yosef didn't realize the brothers were using the Sefer HaYetzirah to create a cow, so he told the father, they're eating Eiver Min Achai. Yeah, but, he didn't suspect they were using it for a supper. Yeah? So Yosef thought they were eating Eiver Min Achai.
Pardon me, as a Jew, are we allowed to make him with magic?
No, it's not magic. It's Sefer HaYetzirah, but we don't know how to use it anymore.
Or we don't know?
No.
If something created not natural way, for instance, they can do in lab some animal. Clone. We don't have to...
So that's a very good question. Let's say we create somebody, let's say we make a goylam. Yeah? They have in the shul, in the office over there, whenever they're in trouble, they bring out, they have a secret goylam. Sometimes we don't have a minion, so what do we think we do, right? The Mishnah Berurah has a question, right? Let's say you have 9 people, and you make a goylam. Is he mitzdarif to a minion? It's not a minion.
There's no soul.
It's a big question in halacha.
He has a breeder.
It's a big question in halacha. The Chacham Tzvi has a tshuva on it. Very big question in halacha. Okay, so says the Shlach Kadosh, these nashim that the Shvatim, Yosef were acting inappropriately with, they created b'Sefer HaYetzirah. There are no isurim with something that is miraculous. So we have a clear proof from the Malbim.
Why wasn't Yosef down Kafchov?
What? It was Neitel Kafchov. It looked pretty bad. It looked pretty bad. Ultimately, the Medrash says, because Yosef wasn't down Kafchos, and he criticized them, so he was suspected of all of these things, right? The Medrash goes on to say. So what we have over here, I think, is that the Shlosh seems to be saying pretty clearly that miraculous items are not halachically, are not subject to halacha. So you'll ask me, and what does the Mishnah Berurah paskin? What does the Mishnah Berurah have to say about miraculous items? He doesn't have anything to say about it, right? It's only a theoretical question. But in the Sefer Shmiras Halosha, the Chafetz Chaim, I believe, also adds in his 2 cents. And that is, the Chafetz Chaim asks, how could the brothers have eaten Eiver Min Achai? Says the Chafetz Chaim, they created it with Sefer HaYetzirah. And Sefer HaYetzirah, when you create something miraculously, you are not subject to halacha. So I think we have 3 pretty solid proofs that miraculous items are not chayiv in halacha. Right? But when they asked Reb Chaim, did you ask this question? He said no. So I'll tell you a little story. It's brought down in the introduction to the new Sefer Asufais Rabbeinu Chaim Halevi that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was once speaking to his son. Which son, I don't know, about how they used to learn in Brisk. Okay? This is, you're getting real the inside view of the yeshiva world. In Brisk, Rabbi Yaakov said, every word was measured. Every word was exact. And if you didn't say over the shiur with the exact same words, with the exact tune and niggin and inflection and emphasis, you don't know you didn't say it. That's not the shiur. And Rabbi Yaakov even said, he had a friend, Rav Mendel Shuk, who was once on a train with Reb Chaim himself in 1917. And Reb Mendel came to Reb Chaim and asked him, Reb Chaim, I have an answer to your question about Shem and Eis. And Reb Chaim said, that's a wonderful answer, but I never asked the question. So he couldn't believe it, because his father, who learned from Reb Chaim, his father said it over every single Chanukah. So he told his father, this question that you claim Reb Chaim asked, he told me he didn't ask the question. Okay. So the father went to Reb Baruch Ber. Reb Baruch Ber was the star pupil of Reb Chaim. And he said, Reb Baruch Ber, Reb Chaim said he didn't ask this question. Reb Baruch Ber said, what? Of course he asked the question. I heard it from him. So says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, what's the pshat? The answer is that in Brisk, the learning was so fine-tuned, it was so exacting, that if you didn't say over the question word for word with the exact, precise way the Rebbe said it over, you didn't say over the question. You never asked that question. You didn't ask the question. So did Reb Chaim ask the question? In Brisk, they say they never asked it. But we have a lot of evidence that whether he asked it or not, it's a good question. Miraculous products are not the real thing. And I think the lesson we learn from here is that in life, we want the shortcut. We want the instant gratification. We want to do things miraculously, easily. But it's not the real thing. The real way to go is through hard work, through effort, through our own hishtadlus, and that is the pure way to do something. That's the authentic way to do something. When you do it with your own hard work, that is the authentic way to go. Have a wonderful evening.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.